All right, good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday, April 15th. Really excited to be here today on this LinkedIn Live. Obviously, we have a lot going on in the world today, and our topic today is very specific to what I think everyone is focused on, which is really navigating the tariffs and really have a Q&A session around how sellers in marketplaces like Amazon and Walmart should address the tariffs. What are some things to think about? What are some smart strategies there? So I'm really excited about today's session. We're working through some technical difficulties, so just bear with us here. I got multiple screens in front of me, but Cautious Far, CEO of Xnurta. I'll be hosting today. I'm really glad, honestly, that we're here because to be honest, there's just between all of the rising tariffs, the uncertainty around what's happening with tariffs, really the pressures on sellers as they're looking to continue to do business in Q2, but also plan for Q3. There's a lot of questions that are not answered, right? There's a lot of uncertainty overall out there. So whether you're a 3P seller or 1P seller, whether you have manufacturing in China or in other countries, really there's a lot of pressure out there. And it's really about how do we navigate through these pressures from what we know. And I think that's a key point here is like, there's a lot of uncertainty. No one's got a magic bullet to follow this game plan and everything's going to be resolved. But ultimately today, we're going to be able to dive a little bit deeper. I personally talked to so many brands, sellers, private equity agencies, you name it, over the last 3-4 days, just because everyone's looking at stuff like, do I pause my ad spend? Do I reduce it? Do I look to pivot and sell in other channels? And really, there's just a lot of questions out there. So I'm really excited today to have this conversation with a really great panel here. I want to first introduce Ryan Dietrich. Ryan Dietrich is not only a good friend, but a very seasoned vet in the space of sellers on Amazon and Walmart. Previously, Ryan was at Kraft and Wilson Electronics, and he's running commerce over at Media Monks. And so or Monks, excuse me. And so with Ryan, it's really about understanding the full journey of a seller, on platforms like Walmart and Amazon. You're looking at retail media spend. You're looking at inventory, stocks, reviews, product detail pages, right? The full Amazon flywheel. So we're really excited to have Ryan to speak to some of the questions that you may have today. In addition, we have June Choi here. He's our SVP here at Xnurta. Obviously, June, former Amazonian, has a lot of context. He was at Amazon when sponsored ads first launched, right? So even from his lens, June can speak to some of the more retail media questions and strategies there. So excited about kind of getting going. We've had some really good questions and already have some of those in front of me. If you do have any questions, put them in the chat. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible. But I guess to kick this off, I wanted to start kind of more in a simple lens. And so what are the conversations both Ryan and JC you guys are having out there? What are some of the biggest fears people have? And Ryan, maybe we start with you on what you're hearing, kind of more of an opening statement, and then we'll have JC speak next.
Sure. Thanks, Kasha. Happy to be here. I think, I run the commerce group at Monks. And so what we have is a variety of clients. We have people that just want our operational and consulting help. We have people that are full service, that want everything, and we have people that just want our advertising. But we have questions from all of our clients right now about tariffs. And I think the big question that everybody says is, that nobody actually says is, how long is this going to go? Everyone understands that there's just a huge amount of uncertainty around this, but it is causing a lot of concern. And I think the big questions we get from sellers and brands right now boil down to basically how much inventory do they currently have and how can you get the inventory? Because this is at its heart a supply chain issue, right? Mm-hmm. We've been through supply chain issues before recently, right? With the pandemic, and everybody remembers that show with like how all the containers, it ended up being $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 a container to ship from Asia to the US market. And we're coming into another slightly different supply chain issue. I think those brands that are used to planning ahead or used to making really big buys, we're getting a lot of concern from them. They're thinking, what is this going to mean for my long-term outlook on the business? should I be bringing in that stuff, right? Stuff takes a while to get from Asia. You have to place your orders at the factory. So right now you're ordering for Q4. And that's really concerning, right? Because if, right now tariffs are at, I think, about 145% on average on products coming out of China, which, Shenzhen and the other major manufacturing area there are a huge part of how we make products and how we sell them in this U.S. market. So 145% more to your cost of goods sold is wildly problematic. So we have a lot of people that are understandably concerned, and depending on their current inventory position, how they source, we advise them in different ways. But we are definitely having ongoing conversations with just about all of our clients at the moment about the
And with Monks, I know you guys have hundreds of clients really in the space of retail media. So really great perspective, and we'll kind of dive in some of these questions here. Pivoting over to June. June, from your lens, when you're talking to brands and sellers and clients in general, what are you hearing maybe outside of what maybe Ryan mentioned?
Yeah, I think just adding on top of what Ryan called out is there's a lot of uncertainty. And it's interesting just speaking with folks that lead or leaders at brands, at agencies. A lot of them are actually thinking through like, hey, these are super uncertain times. We don't want to make rash decisions. Yep. And rash decisions, not just for the short term, but these rash decisions on Amazon or any other e-commerce channel, we don't want to impact the long term. Yep. And so a lot of people, I think, right now are in a little bit of a wait and see mode. To Ryan's point, nobody really knows how long this is going to last. And I think what folks are really trying to do is be strategic and be smart about the decisions that they make in these coming weeks. From everybody that I've talked to, nobody has really said, do this, do this. Everybody is like, okay, let's look into the data. Let's see what we can optimize. Let's see where we can be the most efficient, specifically around retail media, and adjust accordingly. So obviously we'll dig into a little bit more in terms of the nuances, the tactical advice, kind of what we're hearing. Yeah. But that's the general sense that I'm getting. Obviously it's case by case, but that's the general sense right now from the conversations that we're having.
No, that sounds good. So I'm going to kind of dive in again with some of the questions that we've already received prior to this webinar. And again, please, if you have questions, drop them in the chat and we will do our best to get to the questions. So kind of talking about now top brands, right? So this question is really for both Ryan and JC here. When you think of the top enterprise brands, the Fortune 100, 500, how are they looking at this? Because we have different audiences, right? We have 3P sellers, we have 1P sellers, and we'll kind of dive into the different buckets of sellers there. But when it comes to those top brands, how are they looking at this when it comes to their unpredictability in tariffs? Is there an action now happening? Is it a wait and see for these brands? Maybe we could start there, and Ryan or in June, either one of you could kind of jump in.
Sure, I can jump in with what we're telling folks to do. So major clients right now, some own their own manufacturing places in China, some contract, some are U.S. based, right? With their actually how they're sourcing their inventory, right? And so my general advice for these larger brands has been keep flexibility in mind, and very much like June said, don't rock the boat, right? Don't do anything rash or crazy. Don't decide all of a sudden I'm just going to make my Q4 order and take 145% tariff bath right now if you're ordering from Shenzhen. Don't do that. What I would recommend doing is, one, communication. You need to be talking with your suppliers right now and seeing and working out plans to be flexible. Maybe you're still having your product created, your finished goods created for you, but maybe they can store them for a while. Maybe there's a moment where they can be really flexible all of a sudden. Maybe there's a 1 week window where for some reason tariffs drop for a week. Then you might want to do everything you can to get them on a boat that week, right? And the way you're going to be able to do that is you already had the conversations, right? You already have the process in place. You have that level of trust where your manufacturing partner or your own manufacturing groups, they know exactly how to do that, how to really quickly move. I think that's really huge. I think folks that have U.S. distribution in this moment, congratulations. You've been given a gift, really. It's one of those things where we know that if you think of the general approach is going to be, hey, don't spend money to get out of stock. We're probably going to say that 4 or 5 more times. but don't spend money to get out of stock. So you know that advertising costs, especially if your competitors are manufacturing things overseas, they are probably not going to advertise as much right now. So your advertising costs should go down. This might be a real opportunity for you.
Got it. Great.
Yeah, and I think honestly, highly relevant to that question is we just spoke with one of the largest consumer electronic companies, and literally that was the question that I asked is, hey, like how are the tariffs impacting more on the retail media side, I would say,
Yeah.
and how are you guys thinking about it? And his point blank response was it's business as usual. Now that was last week. Who knows if that's changed over the weekend and like literally the last couple of days. But that was literally as recent as last week. It was like it's business as usual. We have things budgeted out and we know what we need to do. We know kind of our goals that we need to hit. So that was actually I was not expecting that response, to be honest, but he basically said business as usual. Then we have other, I would say, larger brands that are thinking about ways to cut costs outside of more so retail media because they know kind of the flywheel that's in place on more of the Amazon retail media lens. So they're really trying to think hard across the board around how almost like as ad spend or retail media as the last resort in terms of cutting costs, which I also found pretty interesting because I thought the immediate response would be the ad spend. And so I think a lot of people in terms of how they're approaching this from that lens, that's what was surprising to me is business as usual, or we're looking at ways to be more efficient outside of cutting costs in terms of retail media. That was actually pretty surprising to me.
So kind of maybe following up on that, June. So when it does come to reactions to tariffs, right, there is a initial response of cutbacks, including reduction in ad spend. So I guess, some of the questions we see a lot is like, should I cut back on ad spends? What is the right ad spend strategy? Of course, there's, you have so many different options on Amazon, sponsored ads, DSP. What is your general advice when it does come to today, how brands and sellers should look at their ad strategy and their ad budgets?
Yeah, I think obviously it's a case by case basis, but I can talk in the specific examples that I've heard and kind of what I've seen, and just speaking with a lot of smart folks.
Yep.
Number one, it's focus on obviously the high margin products. So high margin, as in obviously the ones that are the most profitable, from a strategic standpoint of how do we continue to elevate those products where it makes sense. The other aspect is like it's actually even more compelling for folks of how do we just be as efficient as possible with every single dollar that I spend. And I know I personally talk a lot about AMC, and I think the conversations around AMC, even in these last couple of weeks, especially folks that are running DSP, is how do we leverage AMC to be much more efficient around DSP. And honestly, the topic of custom audiences comes up even more now is like, okay, for the folks that haven't been using custom audiences in the past, a lot of the conversation, a lot of the questions are like, are we doing the right things? Are we being as efficient as possible with the custom audiences or the DSP targeting segments that we're running? And how do we make sure instead of focusing totally on upper funnel, how do we be more efficient with how we look at DSP from a targeting perspective? And so a lot of people are diving into that. A lot of people are digging into almost re-looking their DSP strategy to be a little bit more conversion driven than I would say upper funnel driven. That was the other one. And then with just general and AMC, the other really interesting use cases that I've continued to hear about is how folks are looking more into the customer lifetime value. So they're really looking into customer lifetime value, and it's actually very relevant now that Amazon has released their 5-year look back window across the board for AMC. But even before that is, okay, what are the campaigns that are driving the most customer lifetime value across my whole suite of products? And then how do I look to optimize for my campaigns, for my ASINs, for my strategy for those high customer lifetime value products? I mean, those are just a couple of the examples. I go on and on in terms of driving more efficiency with AMC, but I think just overall, it's just been more and more of a topic from the standpoint of how do we become more efficient with our ad spend if it's not just sponsored products, right? How do we look to AMC to really elevate that strategy?
And I'm kind of keeping an eye on the chat. Drop any specific questions as a brand or seller, as an agency that you may have when it comes to ad strategies. But kind of moving forward from some of the other questions we got prior to this webinar. So I think, Ryan, taking what JC just kind of talked about in terms of ad spend and the way you could look at it, just when you think about the overall Amazon flywheel getting disrupted by drops in ad spend, what kind of comes to mind to you, right? Just generally, just overall as a seller on Amazon, the whole ecosystem of Amazon. So if you do see brands significantly dropping ad spend, what are your thoughts that come to mind?
Sure. I mean, I think you're really at risk. You are at risk if you drop your ad spend for lowering the moat that you have, right, for your brand. You're going to make it less competitive in your category, most likely, and people are going to be able to come and get market share. Now, that might be the lesser evil for you in this case, right? You may be, your options may be either I drop, I lower my ad spend, I pull back a little bit so I don't pay money to go out of stock, or I pay money and I just throw this money away because I pay money and then I drive my sales and then all of a sudden I can't get product in at the correct value, and then all of a sudden I am out of stock. Going out of stock is literally the worst thing you can do in the flywheel. That is it. It is the number one thing that will kill you. It will kill you worse than bad reviews, right? Because once you're out of stock, you're going to get more reviews. People will just write in being upset about it. It is the one thing that will kill you. It takes the longest to recover from. And so it is one of those things where that really does need to be the focus on this supply chain based crisis.
On that note, and this could go for either one of you, but Ryan, this might be better for you. So when you look at most brands and sellers, 1P, 3P, inventory, kind of talking about the kiss of death is not having inventory. What are you seeing right now? Do most brands have inventory for 2 weeks, 2 months, 6 months? Like, and the reason I'm asking this question is like, if you then look at the price hikes that may potentially happen to consumers, would you anticipate that kicking in?
Sure. I think inventory levels in general are all across the board, right? It really does vary. I think we are seeing people since kind of like the last shipping crisis in the pandemic moment. And then after that, we still had really record low interest rates. So it became cheaper for you to hold more inventory and more prudent. That said, not everybody is holding 9 months of inventory, 6 months of inventory. A rule of thumb for me is, if you are at 6 months or less, I would be cautious with your inventory. We don't know how long this is going to take. You're at 9 months of inventory. That's kind of a judgment call, right? Do you want to pull back your advertising? Do you not? I think it really depends on your category. Is everybody else going to have to pull back? Are you lucky enough that everybody else is going to run out and you're just going to get free market share, right? That's another thing. And I think if you have 12 months of inventory, it does seem to me very unlikely that the amount of volatility and confusion that the current tariff situation has continues for 12 months. Now, look, that's not official advice, but I think historically we don't ever see these things go that long, right? I think, and everybody is expecting it to cool down. Further out, when, we don't know, but if this was still happening a year from now, I would be absolutely shocked. And so that's kind of how we think about, I think, inventory in general. What was the second?
Second, it's like, so when you think about price hikes to the consumer, when is that time frame? Is it next month? Is it like maybe 2-3 months down the road, because there are still inventory for most brands for at least the first, for Q2? When would you expect some of those price hikes to happen?
If you get them. If you get price hikes, I would say probably a month or two down the line, just because you have to bring in new stuff. That said, would you blame someone for hiking prices if they still have inventory now and their competitors don't? No, I think that would be the moment, right? That would kind of lessen the blow for you. So we're not really going to know when it is, and it also depends on when it's going to shake down. But I definitely don't think you're going to see any. You should probably start to see some impact now, but I think really, closer to June, July, that's when I think you'll see more stuff go up. If the situation is still the same, right? Situation nominal. If it changes by then maybe we don't get them all.
Yep. Great. Let's talk omnichannel a little bit, right? So we know we have Amazon, we have Walmart, we have Target. Like, there's a lot of different platforms where sellers are selling. when you think about the impact in this, JC, maybe you start and we'll have Ryan chime in. Amazon versus Walmart versus some of these omni channels. Well, how should brands be looking at this?
Yeah, I think Amazon's always going to be incredibly important to anybody's e-commerce strategy. Like that's just a given. The trend right now that we're starting to see is okay, maybe now is the time to maybe look at diversifying the strategy outside of Amazon as well, right? Amazon's always going to be a key investment, an important investment, but obviously platforms like Walmart that have done a great job of expanding their ad tech tools, expanding the marketplace, where the overall CPCs might be more efficient or might be more helpful during this time. I think there's a lot of interesting, a lot of excitement, and a lot of, I would say, strategies in terms of how to leverage Walmart on top of Amazon. And so, as you think about that from that standpoint, we get a lot of brands and agencies that we're talking to in the last week that are truly thinking through and learning. Like, to be honest, one of the questions they have is like, sometimes a lot of these brands and agencies that are just starting on Walmart, their number one question is, how is it different than Amazon? And so there's always this education process that needs to happen. But I think as Walmart continues to evolve, as they start thinking about omni-channel strategies, it's becoming more and more important, I would say, especially during these times when there's a little bit of uncertainty.
Sure. I think I can jump on top of that too. I think with Walmart, and just general omni-channel, what are you trying to prioritize, right? Like what is most important for you, right? Prioritization is going to become more and more important. The less inventory you have to sell, the more you have to decide where you're going to sell it and where your best bang for your buck is going to be, right? So you're going to need to start considering channel profitability if inventory really, really shrinks down. But also, what are your long-term goals, right? If I say I am, a brand that wants to get its product on the shelves at Walmart someday, well, then I might suggest leaning into the Walmart platform, right? Because the way you get on shelf at Walmart right now is you absolutely kill it on Walmart.com, and then they will bring you in store, right? That is the way that you get in store there. So I think when it comes to omni-channel, once you get less and less inventory, the conversation goes from, hey, we should just be available wherever our customers want to shop, to now, what's the most valuable channel for us, both in our future plans and also our marketing.
Not even on omnichannel, but just going back to the broader topic, it's a very interesting time as well because literally in the next couple of months, there are two biggest days, or the Prime Day is coming up.
Yeah.
The biggest days on Amazon.
Yeah.
So I think that is a topic of conversation that also people are asking about. People are wanting to get insights on, like, how do we even think about prepping? What should we be thinking about?
Yeah.
And I think some of the really smart folks that are starting to think about Prime Day, one of the key things that they're looking at is, okay, obviously maximizing Prime Day, and inventory issues are always a topic of concern, which Ryan pointed out. But aside from that, some of the ideas and some of the key points of conversation is how do we make sure we maximize average order value during Prime Day and maximize the dollars that we're spending for Prime Day. And there's some really interesting use cases. Like there's a report that you can pull with AMC called Cross Product Association. And this cross product association model, what people are doing is you can literally see what products people buy frequently together. Literally the ASIN and this ASIN, how many times people buy it together. Or if somebody doesn't buy this ASIN, but there's a more expensive ASIN in your catalog, how many times do they buy that ASIN instead?
Yeah.
And so as people are starting to think about Prime Day, as they start to think about prepping for Prime Day, especially with all this uncertainty, that's one of the topic of conversations around average order value. How do you make sure you increase that as much as possible, whether it's with upsell or bundling to make sure you're maximizing every single dollar that you spend? I think that's where a lot of smart people are starting to think about. They're already starting to prep. They're already pulling these reports to be super tactical with those key days.
Makes sense. I'm getting a lot more questions kind of being fed to me here. So let's look at this one. What's the smartest, and again, either one of you can jump in here. What's the smartest way to reallocate budget between high tariff and low tariff ASINs?
Sure, I'll jump in. I mean, for me, it is looking at per unit profitability. You should have per unit profitability sorted out. with uncertainty, if you're going to continue spending your budget, and again, if you're getting reduced inventory, you need to get the most profit per thing that you sell, possibly, right? And so, I think it's really about you should bring in the high tariff and low tariff, and it should be part of a calculation for you to figure out when I sell this next widget, right? What is my actual profit for that widget, and how much runway do I have for that widget, right? I might be able to sell it for slightly less if it's one of those things that I know I'm not going to run out of stock. So I don't think it's as easy as saying this is high tariff, this is low tariff. What if it's high tariff, but your margin's crazy good on it, right? Then you might not care. Or it's high tariff, but your COGS relative to the MSRP are very low. And if your COGS are only 10% of whatever you're selling, you might be okay with it. You might be like, no, I'm just going to stay the course. So that's kind of my thought. I think it just has to feed into a general profitability calculation.
And then just to add to that, the follow up was that, and JC, maybe you could take this. Do you recommending pausing campaigns for those tariff heavy products or simply lowering bids?
I go back to the start where I think pausing campaigns should be really the last resort, considering all the different factors, right? Like obviously inventory, and there's a lot of broader implications around pausing campaigns versus just decreasing ad spend. And I think everybody talks about this flywheel impact, which is 100% legitimate, and everybody knows it, where if you pause campaigns, you decrease sales velocity, you decrease organic ranking, that could be potentially a much worse long-term impact than just decreasing and saving ad spend. And so I think it goes back to it being a case-by-case basis, but I think that should be one of the last resorts of completely pausing campaigns or completely pausing retail media just because of the impact that it's going to have across the board from an organic ranking. How often do you show up when somebody searches a specific keyword? So in all honesty, that's, as I talked about in previously, that's really the last resort that I think people are talking about. And if they need to do it, they'll do it. But they're really trying to think through, where do we save costs, whether it's manufacturers or whether it's other specific ways to cut costs versus just completely shutting off their ad spend for specific campaigns.
Yeah.
I do want to go back to Ryan's point and the question before around high tariff and low tariff products and the strategy there, because I think it's relevant. So when we talk about cross product association, a part of that strategy, it might not just be high tariff or low tariff. It could be high margin products versus low margin products. The other ways that it kind of goes and bleeds into that strategy where folks are able to see, okay, there is a low margin product that we know does really well. And unfortunately, there's high tariffs.
Yeah.
There's ways where now people are looking at cross product association to see the association of these low margin or high tariff products with high margin, low tariff products. So they can see actually people typically buy this product, but they also usually buy this other very high margin product as well. And so that's where they're starting to look at things from a different strategic lens of like, okay, we can bundle these things together because people typically buy these products together. So maybe we should just bundle them to maximize the ad spend. So I think those are ways you can start thinking about it from a tactical level of how do you leverage these insights? How do you leverage AMC across high tariff, low tariff, high margin, low margin products to be able to really be able to kind of maximize as much of your ad spend as possible.
Got a couple of questions that are specific to sponsored products. So let me ask this: are there best practices for balancing margin protection with maintaining visibility in sponsored products campaigns?
I think it's always an interesting question as you think about like balancing those two things, because sponsored products, from my perspective, is one of the most efficient ad products and tools, not just for conversion, but just general awareness as well. Like obviously it doesn't drive as much upper funnel awareness. It doesn't drive as much overall reach as like these DSP campaigns, but it's just so highly relevant and so highly targeted. That's where I think, and I keep on harping on this, but like I really talk about AMC, but I'm really talking about data. Like that's where the data comes along, where as you think about maximizing these high product, high conversion campaigns in terms of revenue, leveraging AMC to be able to understand like multi-touch attribution. So how should you be spreading your ad dollars across the board if you're optimizing for, let's say, awareness or more reach versus just conversion? And so there are a lot of these tools that data now enables you to leverage where you can start thinking about these strategies without guesstimates, but actually like mathematical logic. Like, hey, the data is telling us to do this, and it seems directionally accurate. And so whether it's maximizing this KPI or another KPI, sometimes they don't go hand in hand, but you can start to be smarter, I would say, of leveraging your ad dollars in different places to be able to maximize specific KPIs in different ways.
All right, just keeping an eye on the chat here and also keeping in mind time here. I got a couple of really good questions, but here's one for you, Ryan. So when it comes to, so there's like a real threat of now manufacturers in certain parts of the world that are now, through TikTok and other social media platforms or just generally are trying to reach out directly to consumers, US consumers, and saying, hey, you know what, here's the actual manufacturing costs, come to us directly. And I think that's freaked out some of the brands and sellers. So if you were, first of all, from a brand and seller perspective, any thoughts or comments there, and then maybe even advice to consumers?
Yeah, I think from the brands and sellers standpoint, the first thing I will say is this is just more fuel to the fire that you need to build your brand. Brand building is a trust exercise, right? And brand investments amortize over time. You're not going to be able to build your brand by just a few brand campaigns, and you're not going to see them hit the bottom line in the next month or two, right? But they are going to amortize over time, right? And the longer you do it, the more you'll have. And that's going to give you a moat and going to give you some loyalty so that if a manufacturer of yours or another manufacturer is knocking off what is happening with your product and then reaches out directly, or they put their stuff up on, let's pick on Alibaba, for instance, then people are going to say, no, I know this brand. I trust this brand. I know, I'm going to stick with this. So that's my first thing is I think the point of that, even the whole question, the premise itself shows the value of investing in your brand at all times. If that's happening now, if it's actually happening to you and you believe it's your manufacturer, I think you need to source a new manufacturer or at least have a very stern conversation about like what this means. Are you allowing your manufacturer to go right to market? Is that something that you're doing? Is it a patented product? So now are they taking your patented product and selling it elsewhere? Like these are things that are real concerns, and those are supply chain concerns that you're just going to have to manage. I haven't heard too much about it, but I think it's always kind of existed, and it's always appealed to a certain type of consumer, a consumer that is kind of get on Alibaba and look, a consumer that is going to spend hours and hours researching one even mid-level price point item. Right? That is where that could possibly come to you. So if you know that your customers are of that ilk, then I would be more concerned, and I might reach out and make sure that my supplier contracts have kind of those carve-outs where it's like, no, we are the exclusive ones that can attract and market and sell in the U.S. market.
Thank you for that, Ryan. I got another question when it comes to around Europe. And so as you're a brand or seller and you sell primarily in the US, should you start looking at your Europe as a marketplace and or just looking at different marketplaces and strategies that maybe you weren't looking before? So how does that tie into maybe a way to think of things, just start asking around and looking through investigating? What would you think when you think of marketplaces like Europe, Japan, and places like that?
Of course, you should always be looking to expand. I think my big watch out for this kind of stuff is you never want to expand your sales channel and give someone who's in charge of a major sales channel a small channel to also grow. When you do that, that small channel will not get the love and attention. And I always use kind of US market versus Canadian market. If I am in charge of both sales in the US and Canada, which one is going to get more attention, more of my attention? I am automatically going to focus on the US more. If I really want to focus on expanding in Canada, or if I really want to focus on expanding in Europe, you really need to make that a sole portion or a major portion of that person's job. I think that's my big watch out there. But for your initial question, should I look at it? Yeah, of course you should. You should look all over the place because, with the tariff situation now, it may be cheaper for you to sell into Australia or Europe or whatever. So you want to take a look.
Do you see anything to add?
No, I think that's spot on. I think um, there's definitely, I think some of the benefactors of this is going to be the EU marketplaces, right? Like that's already a part of the conversation is okay, like Amazon in EU or these e-commerce marketplaces in EU, where potentially like what maybe the distributors will or manufacturers will invest more there,
Yeah.
right? Because of these tariffs. So that's definitely something that people have raised, strategies that folks have raised around okay, like how do we maybe we shift our ad dollars? We're a global company. Maybe we shift it to the EU markets
Yeah.
because of this. And I think there are definitely growing marketplaces like Germany, for instance, that I think it's still like there's so much opportunity there, and it's a fast growing market for Amazon.
Yeah, definitely. I think in the top five outside of the US, you got Germany and UK that are very relevant. So I think
Yeah.
good question there. The next one, JC, I think this would be a good one for you. Are there leading indicators or signals we should watch that could trigger ad strategy shifts tied to tariffs? So what are some of those leading indicators or signals to keep an eye on over maybe the next couple of weeks as things keep changing here?
That's a great question. And just kind of thinking through the overall answer. I mean, I think the some of the biggest leading indicators are just overall like the indicators of how should they think about ad strategy. I personally think for me like ROAS is outdated in the sense of measurement. Like I think there's a lot of ways that you can gamify ROAS to make it look good from a reporting perspective. I would almost like rethink that question in the sense of like what are the key metrics that people are starting to look at a little bit differently from a value standpoint of like instead of ROAS, maybe lifetime value ROAS, right? Where now you can leverage these reports with AMC to truly understand, okay, like how is this lifetime value ROAS and how are these campaigns impacting total sales, accounting for all of these different things that we're doing in the last 12 and a half months versus just the immediate impact. Because then if you know what's the trend in the last 12 and a half months, considering repurchase rates, considering just more so than those direct purchases, it makes people smarter about where they invest their budget. I'll actually give like a very good example of this. I was speaking to a brand that historically invested a ton in two specific campaigns, one that had a 2x ROAS and one that had a 4x ROAS. And they actually looked at and leveraged the lifetime value ROAS. And I know there's a lot of nuances that go into this, so it's not just one to one. But they actually just directionally looked at the lifetime value ROAS and they saw the last 12 and a half months and they saw the lifetime value ROAS was actually higher for the 2x ROAS campaign than the 4x ROAS campaign. And so what they actually ended up doing was slowly started investing more dollars into that 2x ROAS campaign versus the 4x ROAS campaign. And what ended up happening was the total account sales incrementally grew as they invested more into that 2x ROAS or 2x ROAS campaign versus the 4x. So I think those are the things that people should be thinking about is really like what are the right metrics to be thinking about and how do you optimize it? And again, I know it's like there's a lot of nuances that actually go into lifetime value ROAS. It's not just like a direct like this is the lifetime value ROAS impact. But I think there are really interesting directional indicators that people should start looking at from a cross-product association to a lifetime value ROAS to like even more so like one of the interesting ones with AMC data was add to carts versus just conversions. Like with AMC data, you can actually see add to carts that sponsored products are driving. And that's not a metric that's readily available. And so these are like new metrics or I would say updated metrics that AMC has now opened up that allows people to just be smarter in terms of their ad spend and how they go about their ad strategy.
I think I want to jump in on there too. I think one of the metrics that you want to try to get, if you are a larger advertiser, you have an Amazon ad rep. You want to get a blinded analysis of CPCs across your category. Okay, and you want to get that now, and then you want to be able to get it in a few months, because I suspect if the turmoil continues, CPCs are going to go down, right? And that's going to give you a better clue on what kind of return should we be expecting, right? It's going to help reinforce that point that maybe you don't turn off your ads if you freak out. Like maybe you pull back a little bit because all of a sudden you don't need to spend as much because CPCs are so far down, you're actually going to drive the same value for less, right? So the way you can validate that is find some kind of category search information, and that you can get from your Amazon advertising rep. If you ask for it blinded, please give me something blinded on the category. Those are the magic words. Do not ask for specifics. They are not going to share specifics.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I think we're coming to the end here. Fantastic questions by the audience, great responses there. I think it would be great to wrap it up with this one question, and then anything you want to add is kind of more closing comments. So no one's got a future map in front of them, right? But like projecting this out from what you're seeing in the seats that you are in respectively, do you think this is a 6 to 12 month impact on tariffs, or is this going to be, we're talking about this spilling into 2026 and beyond? So maybe Ryan, start with you, and then JC, maybe you can add your thoughts.
Right on the spot, making me say it live. Thanks for that, and then making me go first. Thank you, Coffee. Well, I think a little bit, a tiny bit of both, but I think major impact. We're saying like, hey, this is major turmoil. Will this continue? I think this is a 6 to 12 month thing. I don't think this kind of like global turmoil can possibly continue at this level. Now, for the long term, there will be things that happen coming out of this that are more of a permanent change to the status quo. But I don't think they're going to be plus 145%.
Yeah, hope so. JC?
Yeah, I think, and I think China has come out and said they're not going to add additional tariffs. It doesn't make sense for anybody. I might have read that, but I think I agree. It's like 6 to 12 months from that standpoint. But again, I'm no macroeconomist at all. This is just a shot in the dark of folks that are much smarter than me that are taking guesses as well. But really, I would assume it's 6 to 12 months because I think it's putting a lot of people in a lot of difficult positions from a standpoint of just the overall economy. So my guess would be 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank both of you for joining today. I know how busy it is right now. It was just working with brands and sellers and just helping people navigate through this. I will say that if you have any follow-up questions, please reach out directly. I know Ryan over at Monks and JC and the team here at Xnurta are happy to answer any follow-up questions, any questions that we may have not gotten to today. Thank you, both of you, for joining today. And yeah, I think we'll keep an eye on this ever-evolving world. I think this is a conversation that's going to be ongoing for a while. But really appreciate everyone tuning in, and we'll just kind of navigate through this together. So Ryan and JC, thanks again.
Thanks for having me.